Welcome to Office Hours. I am Steve Drost. With me, as always, Will Kaplan. Of course, Will and I are both from the Quivr team. And what is Quivr? It's simple. We are the CRM built by financial advisors for financial advisors, and our objective is simple: help you run your business at peak efficiency. In each episode, we take a couple of cool items that came directly from Quivr users who are trying to do just that, make their lives just a little bit easier. Will, at Office Hours not too long ago, you were talking to a current user of Quivr, and you guys went down the rabbit hole about our meeting types and specifically the meeting module. So before we dive into meeting types, for our listeners, I will just give a high-level overview of what the meeting module is, why the feature exists, what the purpose is. But in short, the meeting module is the section that helps you prepare for meetings, hold meetings, follow up for meetings, and monitor clients between meetings. And the whole premise of it came from one of my first jobs in the industry when I had to make these, we call them huddle notes. And the huddle note had every single thing about the client: the meeting agenda, their open actions, activity history, balances, everything. It took me about 20 to 30 minutes to make. And when you had 20 meetings a week, that meant I spent basically every single Monday, every single week making these huddle notes. And the meeting module, the whole point of it is to give you that huddle note automatically. Right. So now that we know what the meeting module is, Will, can you elaborate or maybe dive a little bit deeper into what conversation you guys were having about different meeting types?
Yeah, and Steve, this is the one that we get. It's not uncommon, and I do think that it's something that at some point we will pick up and add some, development time to sort of address the fundamental issue that we had in this conversation. But really, what this comes down to is right now the way that Quivr works is you have client review meetings, you have topic specific meetings, and you have some prospect meetings. And one of the sort of, I'm not going to say it's a universal ask, but it is a common ask is, hey, I want a different meeting type, right? Like I want this client called me up and we had a conversation and I want to do a little bit more than just log a call. I want to consider it an actual meeting because I want some of the data to like flow into that structure that we have for meetings. And so the request in this specific case was we want an ad hoc meeting. Okay. So as you well know, there are some limitations around what Salesforce does. I guess the way that Salesforce manages things like the Quivr package. And so editing those meeting types isn't really something that we can allow at this point in time. I think that finding a way to allow you to sort of create some of your own and have that work a little bit better is something that we will probably pick up at some point. But what we need to talk about then is how do we fix this now? Like how do we create some solutions now? And so the main thing to understand about these meeting types is what is fundamentally controlling this is what is called a record type. And a record type, the metaphor that I usually use is Salesforce is an ice cream factory and we're making ice cream base. And then the very last stage of the process is we add the flavor. Some becomes chocolate, some becomes strawberry, some becomes vanilla, whatever your favorite ice cream is, use your imagination, throw that flavor in. And the record type is kind of the flavor. It's what changes this record into something specific for a client review meeting versus a topic specific meeting. As you well know, fundamentally what we're changing when we switch between these record types is the ability to control what you do in prep and what you do in follow-up. Those are pick lists. And so record types can control pick list values. Steve, does that make sense? Because I feel like that's can be kind of a confusing topic.
No, the whole point of the different types of meetings is to control the options available for the meeting prep and meeting follow-up items. Because if you look at your prospect process, your initial 20-minute phone call, you're going to have significantly different prep for that call than you are for a normal annual review meeting with a client. So we want to give you these different types of meetings mainly so that you get to control the different prep and follow-up items for that specific type of meeting, right? Because then if you think about where this is going to go, remember, these meetings hit your homepage. So are you working on prep? Is your team working on prep? Do you have follow-up you need to do? It's all interacting with your daily docket, so you know exactly what you need to do. And then you also know exactly what your team is working on.
And that's it, exactly. So I guess the blessing and the curse that we're now looking at with this is at this point in time, adding additional meeting types is not something we generally recommend because there's some code that runs to get stuff onto the daily docket. There is some functionality tied to key dates. Like there are some things that happen with meetings that depending on what you change, we're not really sure what's going to happen. And so we want to be really mindful of that. So working within that system that exists right now of these 6 different record types, what can we do to try and get more flexibility? And so some of the solutions that we came up with in this conversation was, well, If meeting prep and meeting follow up are kind of the same for any types of meetings, then you can collapse those and you can either just change the name of the meeting. So, like, as a good example, when I met with clients, I typically had I try to meet with all my clients twice a year, and I had a spring meeting and a fall meeting. And a lot of advisors are going to do that where they're going to be like, maybe spring is the planning meeting, fall is the tax meeting. I didn't do that. I was the weird one. And so, what my meetings looked like were more generally just sort of like, we're going to talk about the tasks that we still need to do for the year at each one of those meetings and kind of plan a little bit around when we're going to do those tasks. And so for me, meeting prep and follow up for my spring and fall meeting was largely the same. Review the client, review the task list, add anything to the agenda that I need to add, get ready for the meeting. Great. I'm good to go. Those meetings then I can collapse into a single meeting type, change one of the names to spring, change one of the names to fall. I don't have a problem. And so as you go to like customize these meetings and try to get them a little bit more, defined for what's going on in your practice, I think the biggest thing to think about is what's going on in prep, what's going on in follow up, and do we want to use those fields? We have users that don't use prep and follow up. They don't use those pick lists. They have sort of kicked over to, we're going to run all of our prep and follow up out of workflows. And we're just going to ignore those fields on the meeting. And that's actually okay. You can totally do that. I think that the reason that you as an advisor, and I'll maybe you can tell me if I'm crazy, or if you can tell me this is, I think this is the reason we do it the way we do it. But the more meetings you have in a condensed period of time, so like Surge, I know you practice Surge, having all those tasks show up in the task list can be problematic. And so that's one of the reasons that we break prep and follow up into those pick lists, is to keep all those tasks separate. They don't show up in the daily docket. You're not going to have, 500 tasks show up over a 2 week
And that's not
period.
an exaggeration. My entire career, I've done some form of surge, whether it was every single week of the year at my prior firm or surge now. And I would legit, 15 meetings a week times 10 to 12 things I need to do. I mean, you can do the math. That's a couple hundred tasks.
Yeah, and so our concern is like, we do have some prioritization functionality in the daily docket right now, so you can kind of quickly get glanceable like what's important, what's not important. But I don't want to miss an ACH request that comes in because I've got 300 meeting tasked things to do.
I
And
think
so
my
we've
I think my takeaway on this, Will, truthfully, would be what are you trying to accomplish and what data point are you trying to report on? So if a client just calls you and it turns into an ad hoc meeting and you just want to use the normal review meeting object or record type and you want to type in some notes and have your AI note taker populate the notes into there, there's nothing wrong with that. You can override meeting prep, you can override meeting follow up and just have the meeting be marked as completed and it's taken care of and it's done. And there's no issues there. If you're trying to, like you mentioned, document, is this part of a surge? Is it part of a tax planning meeting? Is this part of a, whatever meeting? You could easily create a little pick list and toss that onto the page layout and document what specific type of meeting this is. So I would really try to work backwards and say, what are we trying to report on? What are the end results that we want? And with the record types for the meetings, the two things that I care about truthfully the most is I care about meeting follow up to make sure that's handled. I actually don't use the meeting prep. I'm not sure if I've disclosed that publicly yet, but I don't use the meeting prep because all of my meeting prep is done either solely by me because it's a prospect meeting of some sort, or it's done through Surge and it just happens in our Surge workflow. But it's mainly for meeting follow up. And the second thing that I want to use it for is to get a count of meetings. So there is a field on the meeting module that says, is this a part of Surge? And I do that. Is this a part of my spring surge, my fall surge? Is it not in a surge? And I like to track that metric to know how many ad hoc meetings am I having. So for me, I actually don't use the topic specific meeting very much because I just use the review meeting and then I know that it's not in a surge and therefore I know that that's the metric I care about because if I'm having a ton of meetings outside of my surge, then I'm not doing a very good job of my surge. So for me, that gets me the metrics that I care about. Maybe you care about different things. Maybe you want to make sure you're having at least 3 meetings with your A clients. Well, perfect. Then you can query any record type. It doesn't matter. So you don't need to document that. So my challenge to our users first would be to think about what outcome do we want? What data point do we care about? What KPI are we seeking? And once we have those metrics there, come to office hours and we can help you create a singular field or provide you guidance to get that output. Because again, Salesforce, right? Quivr's built on Salesforce. Therefore, it is incredibly customizable. So while you might not be able to, get that extra record type to make it look 1,000% like you want, with one extra, finagle, we can actually make it where you just picking that option is required. You have to do it, right? That pick list of what type of meeting or meeting subtype is a required field. Make it a required field. It has to get selected. It has to be done. It's not going to take you any longer to create the meeting, but you can get that data point. So I don't know. It's a little tough here because, this person, I mean, they're a great advisor. I know who they are. I think their firm is awesome. I think they have great operational processes and procedures. But I do think, and if they're listening, I really apologize for this comment if it's offensive, but I do think there might be a little bit of a disconnect on why we're doing what we're doing when focusing on the results that we want. Because once you know what you want, once you whiteboarded your desired outcome, I know for a fact we can use the media module and potentially another feature within the system, projects, workflows, you name it, to get you where you want. Is that fair? That's kind of like everything inside
Yeah.
Quivr. Tell us where you're trying to go and we'll help you get there.
Well, and to your point, like I think the biggest issue that we've got in this particular case is making sure that everybody in a larger firm is on the same page.
Yes.
And so there is a little bit of like, oh, right, we've hijacked this other record type and we're using it for this other purpose now. Like I do appreciate their desire to kind of want everything to be really clean. And I think one of the, again, greatest feature and curse of Salesforce is like, it is so customizable. It's hard when you say like, well, no, you can't, this is this one little place you can't customize it. It can't be exactly the way that you want it. Sometimes it's hard to accept that. But yeah, I mean, I do think that a lot of the functionality is still achievable. And again, I also think that this is something that probably at some point we're going to, give a little bit of development love to try and iron it out a little bit for people and do add some additional functionality. But yeah, there's ways to get around it. It takes a little bit of compromise right now.
But if you know where you're trying to go, and then even with you call it process compliance, right? Making sure big teams are doing things the same way. There are ways to force process compliance, and that is with data validation rules, right? If this meeting is open or if this meeting is completed, then, these things have to happen. Or if I mark somebody as deceased, right, I have to have a date of death, right? There's ways to make sure that those things happen, required fields, all of that. And you have that functionality. But the theme today, even though we're talking about meetings, I still think the theme today, and honestly, the theme of a lot of our office hours sessions are, where are you trying to go? Once you understand what your desired outcome is, those KPIs, that workflow, whatever you want that outcome to be and that flow to look like. Once you know that, it's then, okay, let's go back to the data set at hand and figure out what we need to do to that data set to ultimately get where you want to go. And remember, if you're a Quivr user, join us on Wednesdays for office hours. These are the most common types of questions that we get. And I'm being serious. The first few months somebody's on the system, the questions are maybe more elementary, more blocking, tackling. Can you remind me how to do this? But then it clicks, right? At some point in the first month or two, it clicks. And then the second, third, 17th quarter that these people are on our system, it becomes things like this. Hey, I want to track how many prospect meetings we're having by advisor, and I want to know the location of them because we want to know if our close rate is higher if we're doing Zoom or in person. Okay, perfect. Well, we have this field. We can do this, create this dashboard, make this a required field, give it 90 days, and you're going to have that data, right? We can get that stuff for you. And that's the stuff that we actually enjoy, believe it or not. If you're not a Quivr user, that is okay. Don't worry. Everybody makes mistakes. But remember, it is not too late. Come schedule a demo. Come hang out with me. Come hang out with Will and see what Quivr can do for you and for your practice.